A figure stood amidst a blinding white light, their form obscured by a hazy aura. As the discomfort in my eyes gradually faded, her silhouette became clearer, delicate eyebrows, almond-shaped eyes, and a habit of pressing her lips together before smiling. It was really Emily.
Emily? Is it really you? Am I dreaming?
I stared blankly at the person standing vividly before me.
It's almost 7, get up, lazy John.
Hearing this familiar nickname, tears involuntarily rolled down my cheeks. I turned over and got up, pulling my wife into my arms. Through my tears, I felt her warmth against me and heard her slightly exasperated voice in my ear.
Emily, you're here. But, your plane accident, was it real or just a nightmare?
Dreams reflect our thoughts. Come on, did you buy insurance for me?
I laughed and hugged her tighter, feeling the overwhelming joy of regaining what was lost.
I'm so afraid of losing you.
It was just a nightmare. It's over now. Get up now, or you'll be late.
I took out my phone and checked the date again, December 5, 2022, 7:03 a.m. I vaguely remembered sitting by Emily's gravestone and seeing those small engraved letters, Emily, November 15, 1993, December 5, 2022. I was momentarily confused. Was it really just a nightmare? I got out of bed, followed Emily, and squeezed her shoulder, then touched her hand.
John, I would never leave you. It was just a dream. When you wake up, the pain from the dream will slowly fade. Can you still clearly remember the feelings from the dream?
I carefully recalled the sensations from the dream. But those sorrowful emotions began to feel distant and unclear. I gently shook my head.
Then hurry up and wash up for breakfast. I made dumplings.
She stood at the kitchen door and playfully winked at me.
Boiling water or cold water?
Cold water? Isn't cold water better for thawing?
I entered the kitchen and lifted the lid off the pot on the stove. A wave of steam rose and then dissipated, revealing a pot full of dumpling soup.
Sorry, I thought since you were working late, I could cook and let you sleep a bit longer.
Working late? I suddenly remembered a detail from the nightmare. In the dream, I had also been working late, forced to cancel my ticket and not accompany Emily on the flight. That flight to City B, I remembered, was at 2 p.m.
Is it a 2 p.m. flight?
Emily looked at me, puzzled, and nodded. A wave of panic. I recounted the dream to Emily once more, insisting repeatedly that it was a prophecy.
You're mixing things up. Over time, the flight, and the suitcase by the sofa, these were already there before you fell asleep. You just put these details into your subconscious and then wove a dream out of them.
Her words made me waver a bit. But I was still scared of the slim chance that it might come true.
Emily, you have to believe me. What if it's not just my subconscious?
Emily completely lost her patience.
You've watched too much Final Destination. A prophetic dream? More like a bubblegum prophecy.
I opened my mouth to speak, but she frowned impatiently at me.
Choose, go to work or face the consequences from me.
I hesitated. In the end, with dignity and reason, I chose to go to work. Sitting in the subway car, I pondered what Emily had said about the subconscious. It could indeed be the subconscious at work. But I vaguely remembered that there was a segment in the nightmare that happened after I fell asleep on the morning of December 5th. Before I took the subway, I did something that felt very crucial. But what was it? I couldn't recall. The subway station announcement interrupted my thoughts. The crowded passengers surged out like receding waves, leaving the car empty. I looked at the station name revealed after the crowd dispersed outside the car, High Tech West. I was to get off at the next stop. I stood up and walked towards the door, gazing at the rapidly passing advertisement boards outside the window, unable to stop recalling the details of the nightmare. In the dream, I walked down from the cemetery and couldn't find a bus stop after walking a long way. The increasingly dense rain and bone-chilling cold made me groggy, and I stumbled into a subway station I had never seen near the cemetery. It was a very strange subway station, eerily quiet and deserted. Only the left side of the car was lit, with the doors wide open as if waiting for me. I had been drenched in the rain all day, my head throbbing unbearably, and I got on the train without even checking the station name. My thoughts tugged back and forth, and I felt a splitting headache. The advertisement boards outside the window had disappeared at some point. At this moment, the subway plunged into an unnaturally thick darkness, the car suddenly as silent as if it had sunk into the deep sea. In the endless darkness ahead, a beam of light suddenly appeared. A girl emerged. Dressed in black with a ponytail, she stood facing my direction. Though I couldn't see her face clearly, I felt that under the eerie light, the blurred face was glaring at me fiercely. The scene from the dream was reappearing. In that instant, I was paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, a fragment flashed through my mind. I remembered a detail.
When Emily called me from the airport lounge to let me know she was safe, she mentioned running into an acquaintance. I recall it was Alice, the daughter of Emily's parents' neighbors.
I took a few deep breaths to calm myself.
If Emily also runs into Alice at the airport lounge this afternoon, then I must not let Emily board the plane.
Though I had made up my mind, I found it hard to concentrate at work. Restlessly, I finally made it to lunch break. I hastily ate a few bites and rushed out of the cafeteria to find a quiet place. I dialed Emily's number. The phone rang for a long time before she answered, and I could faintly hear the noise of the airport terminal in the background.
Emily, did you pick up your ticket? Is your journey safe?
Yes, everything is fine. Why do you ask?
Serious, have you seen anyone familiar?
Puzzled, anyone familiar? Who?
Hopeful, Alice.
Her voice became somewhat distant, and I guessed she was looking around.
Serious, I haven't seen her. Who told you she was also returning to B City today?
The discrepancy from my dream made me breathe a sigh of relief, and the heavy weight on my heart lifted.
Cheerful, oh, never mind. Just a bad dream, I guess. Thought I watched too much of Final Destination.
I made up a random excuse to brush it off, then changed the subject and chatted with Emily for a bit before hanging up. In the afternoon, I threw myself entirely into my work. Just as I finished color grading a video and was waiting for it to render, I realized the office had somehow fallen into a buzz of whispered conversations.
Puzzled, what's going on?
I took out my phone and found that the network was down and my phone had somehow been set to airplane mode. The last message I received was from Emily.
I asked Alice. She is indeed returning to B City today, but she couldn't get a plane ticket and switched to the high-speed train.
I turned off airplane mode and reconnected to the Wi-Fi, intending to reply.
Excited, John, did you see the news? The plane to B City this afternoon went missing.
I froze, hearing something shatter in my mind.
Terrified, the plane to B City?
Excited, yeah, the one that left at 2 p.m., flight number.
He looked down and swiped his phone a few times, then looked at me with an exaggerated expression.
Excited, holy crap, John, that's the flight I couldn't get a ticket for. I was just complaining about having to work overtime because I couldn't get a ticket. Oh my god, I'm so lucky.
I stood up slowly, feeling the world spin around me. All my emotions and memories came rushing back at once. I remembered the anger when I claimed Emily's incomplete remains, the despair of seeing her reduced to ashes.
Desperate, how could I, with a glimmer of hope, watch Emily walk towards her end again?
The helplessness inside me made me dash madly towards the office door. Just as I used all my strength to push open the seemingly 1,000-pound glass door, icy water surged towards me. The water knocked me back repeatedly, forcing me to let go of the glass door. Behind the glass door stood a girl, dressed in black, with a ponytail.
Cold. Why did you let her get on the plane again?
I looked at her furrowed brows and heard her cold voice muffledly say those haunting words. I sat up, gasping for air. As oxygen filled my lungs and my senses gradually returned, I felt the sticky sweat covering my body. A hand was gently stroking my back, and a muffled voice sounded in my ear.
Hey, are you okay?
Emily? I heard my own hoarse voice. She responded and leaned in to hug me. Tears instantly streamed down my face. I remembered the girl in black who had splashed water on me and forcibly dragged me into an empty subway station before I woke up. As the subway car started moving, my consciousness began to blur. I heard her say, "Don't let her get on the plane again." A plane? Yes. The plane that caused Emily's 2 tragic incidents. I broke free from Emily's embrace and frantically pulled out my phone. The date displayed, December 5th, 2022, 7:03 a.m. I was back on the morning of the day Emily had her accident.
Did you have a nightmare?
I nodded instinctively. In truth, whether she knew the reality or not didn't matter. What mattered was that I couldn't let her get on that plane again. After I calmed down, Emily went back to the kitchen to continue cooking dumplings. At her urging, I went into the bathroom, brushing my teeth while pondering how to prevent Emily from boarding that plane. 2 options lay before me. One was to stop Emily from going to City B, and the other was to find an alternative mode of transportation. The first option was definitely not feasible. Emily had to go to City B because her younger brother, Michael, who was in high school, had gotten into a serious altercation with a teacher. He had caused significant injury, leaving the teacher in a coma. Michael himself had been injured and was currently in the hospital. When questioned, Michael initially claimed that the teacher had done something extremely inappropriate, prompting him to act in defense of a girl. Investigations revealed that there was indeed a middle school-aged girl present at the scene besides the 2 of them. However, when the police found the girl, she denied being there. Strangely, upon hearing her denial, Michael also changed his story. He no longer mentioned defending the girl, only saying he acted out of a sense of justice and had no regrets. Beyond that, he refused to say another word. Now, the teacher's family was suing Michael for provocation and intentional harm. The teacher remained in a coma, unable to give a statement. Interviews with others painted the teacher as a gentle and well-respected individual. Michael, having just turned 18, was in a precarious situation if he continued to withhold the truth. If convicted of intentional harm, his future would be ruined. Michael's parents were frantic, constantly calling Emily to urge us to come home and persuade Michael to speak up, while also pressuring Michael to tell the truth. Despite all their efforts, Michael remained silent, only repeating, "I have no regrets." We were equally anxious about Michael, but phone calls to persuade him had been ineffective. Emily was so worried she couldn't sleep at night. However, the project I was working on was nearing completion, and my boss wouldn't grant me leave. Emily's class was preparing for their final exams, and she couldn't find a substitute homeroom teacher. It wasn't until the day before yesterday that she managed to arrange for a substitute and got 3 days off. At this point, it was impossible to stop her from going back. With the first option ruled out, I began to consider the second one. The second option was much easier to achieve. I could tell Emily that I had successfully taken leave from the company, and after we had our meal, we could catch the next available high-speed train. Although the train ride would take longer, if we left immediately, we would still arrive in B City earlier than by plane. With this in mind, I quickly finished washing up and headed to the kitchen. The kitchen was filled with steam. Emily stood amidst the rising steam, attentively watching the pot lid enveloped in mist.
It should be ready in 2 more minutes.
Her serious expression as she stared at the pot lid was quite adorable. Smiling, I suggested switching from plane tickets to high-speed train tickets and mentioned that I had already taken leave, so we could catch the next available train after our meal.
That sounds like a good plan.
She nodded and handed me her phone. I took the phone and processed the ticket cancellation, watching as the cancellation was confirmed. At that moment, a memory I had failed to recall on the subway came back to me. It was a memory I once thought could verify the truth of my prophetic dreams. That memory was about canceling tickets. The first time, the ticket I canceled was bought by Alice. The second time, due to my unsettled mind, I forgot to cancel the ticket, and Alice didn't get a ticket, which led to a minor deviation where Emily didn't meet a familiar person. Would Alice get this ticket again? I saved Emily, but who would save Alice? Who would save the lives of all the passengers and crew on the plane?
It's ready!
Emily's joyful exclamation brought me back to reality, and I looked in her direction. In the pot, after the steam had dissipated, there were no longer the soup dumplings I had seen the previous 2 times. Instead, there were plump, round dumplings. Cold water in the pot?
Yes, it helps thaw them better.
Why was it different this time, even though it was cold water in the pot? I was astonished as I looked over Emily's shoulder at the stove. Next to the stove was a large bowl and a slotted spoon. On the white tiles between the stove and the bowl, I saw a row of shiny water stains. Had someone taken the dumplings out of the cold water after Emily left? Realizing that neither the bowl nor the slotted spoon was something Emily had taken out, I became aware of one thing. There might be someone hiding in our home. The thought sent a shiver down my spine.
It seems like I took it out but just forgot about it.
In the past, I would have just smiled and let it go. But now, after experiencing the pain of losing Emily twice, I couldn't afford to be careless. I served the dumplings and brought them to the living room.
I need to change clothes.
Using the excuse, I clutched the fruit knife hidden in my sleeve and searched every possible hiding spot in the house. But apart from the water stains between the stove and the large bowl, there were no traces of a third person.
Maybe Emily really did take it out and then forgot about it.
The high-speed train traveled a long distance. As Emily leaned against me and fell asleep during the smooth and lengthy journey, I was still pondering this question.
Did Emily really forget after taking out the bowl?
Later, I leaned against the window and dozed off as well. I slept until we reached the station, and the dreamless sleep restored some of my energy.
Emily, we're here. Let me take down the luggage.
I held Emily's hand as we stood in line between 2 rows of seats, waiting to get off the train. At that moment, I heard familiar whispers and occasional exclamations from the crowd.
It's the news release about the missing plane.
I instinctively tightened my grip on Emily's hand, suppressing the guilt that welled up inside me.
I am just an ordinary person. I can barely protect my family. I can't stop a plane from taking off, nor can I save everyone.
This thought tormented me until the taxi arrived at Emily's parents' neighborhood, and I barely managed to shake it off.
Emily, we've arrived.
As soon as Emily and I got out of the car, an elderly couple hurriedly got in from a distance. The taxi quickly turned along the road we had come from and sped away, while Margaret and William, who had been waiting at the entrance of the neighborhood, came up to greet us.
Welcome back. Let me take the luggage.
Thank you, William.
After a few refusals, I finally let him carry Emily's small shoulder bag. Margaret led the way to their home in Building 12. She seemed to be in a better mood because of our arrival and started chatting loudly about family matters.
Did you see Robert and Linda? Their daughter was on the plane that went missing today.
Life is so unpredictable.
She suddenly remembered something and turned to ask me.
John, the flight to City B at 2 p.m., was that the one we had booked earlier?
Seeing me nod, Margaret exaggeratedly exclaimed and hugged Emily.
Oh, how lucky you are.
William also squeezed to the front, looking Emily up and down as if she had just returned from the brink of death.
Thank goodness you're safe.
I carried the suitcase and lagged behind, watching Emily being surrounded by her parents.
I am just an ordinary person. Being able to protect Emily is already a great achievement.
I kept repeating this to myself, while going upstairs, while eating, and while visiting Michael in the hospital. I was worried that Emily, being pregnant, would be exhausted after a day of running around, so I let her stay home. Following the room number provided by Margaret, I went alone to persuade Michael. However, no matter how much I tried, he kept repeating the same phrase.
I have a clear conscience.
Suppressing my frustration, I left the hospital. As I walked down the street with the cold wind picking up, I caught a faint whiff of smoke in the air. A fire truck, sirens blaring, sped by from a distance. When I was just 2 blocks away from our neighborhood, I saw thick black smoke rising into the sky from the direction of home. Pedestrians nearby had stopped in their tracks, gathering in small groups, whispering as they watched the heavy smoke billow. A terrible premonition surged within me. I quickened my pace. By the time I reached the entrance of the neighborhood, the smoke in the air was so thick it was hard to breathe. People who had been watching from outside the neighborhood were starting to move away. An elderly woman, seeing me standing still, kindly tried to pull me away.
Mary, which building is on fire?
The one near the gate. Building 12, I think.
Seeing she couldn't move me, Mary covered her mouth and nose, coughing as she walked away. Building 12! My whole body began to tremble uncontrollably, and that familiar buzzing sound returned. Another fire truck sped past me, turning into the neighborhood. I pulled out my phone and saw 2 missed calls from Emily. Trembling, I tried to call her back while running after the fire truck into the neighborhood. Emily's phone wouldn't connect, so I called William and Margaret. I kept dialing the 3 numbers repeatedly, but all I got was the monotonous beeping. In frustration, I threw my phone to the ground. Memories of Emily's 2 previous close calls and the accompanying pain mixed with my current helplessness. My throat felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I wanted to ask someone if anyone had escaped from the building, but I couldn't get any words out. The firefighters were all busy, no one would notice me. If I ran into the building now, there was a slim chance I could save Emily. With that thought, I gritted my teeth and ran towards the smoke-filled building. Suddenly, a strong force came from my left, and a pair of powerful arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me away. I struggled frantically, but the smoke filling my lungs made me as weak as a wilted seaweed. I could only let those hands drag me away as my consciousness began to fade. Just before I completely blacked out, I felt my cheek brush against a cool, cross-shaped pendant. Narrator, tone, serious. I woke up from unconsciousness to find myself once again in the eerie, silent subway station. But this time, I wasn't alone. Through my blurry vision, I saw a girl dressed in black with a ponytail, leaning against the wall and frowning at me. I noticed the silver cross necklace hanging from her collar and remembered the cold touch on my face before I passed out. Just as I was about to question her for stopping me, she spoke first.
Girl toned sad. I thought keeping her off the plane would save her. Now it seems it's not that simple.
The girl, who looked barely in her early 20s, spoke with a tone of maturity, her brows revealing an undeniable weariness and sorrow. I saw that her features bore a striking resemblance to Emily's, and the words of reproach I had prepared swallowed back down. I sat up, pondering her words. This stranger, whom I had never met, seemed to be contemplating how to save Emily. I looked at the open door of the subway next to her. Through this subway, I could go back in time to see Emily again. This thought eased my grief a bit, but confusion surged up.
Me, Tone, serious, who are you?
She looked ahead, not answering my question.
Me, Tone, serious, what did you mean by what you just said?
Girl tone, serious, the butterfly effect. The ticket you refunded was bought by Alice, whose parents live next door to your in-laws. When the news of the plane going missing came out, Alice's parents rushed out in such a hurry that they didn't even take off their aprons, let alone turn off the stove where they were boiling black chicken soup.
Me, Tone, confused, could it really be such a coincidence?
She shook her head and sat down next to me.
Girl tone, serious, I don't know, but it's more plausible than saying Emily's unavoidable fate was due to her being in a bad feng shui position.
I thought about her words and, after a moment of silence, tentatively said,
Me, Tone, hopeful maybe if I can stop the plane from taking off, Emily could be saved.
Girl tone, unfriendly, why go to such lengths? Just don't refund your ticket.
She stared at me for a long time, then sneered as if she understood something.
Girl tone, unfriendly, oh, someone like you wants to play the hero?
Her disdainful tone made me angry, but the words stuck in my throat. I couldn't deny it. If given the chance, I did want to try to save everyone on that plane. I calmed myself and turned to her.
Me, Tone, serious, I won't let Emily board the plane. I'll find a way to keep her safe at home, away from any danger. I won't recklessly shout on the plane that it's going to crash or that I'm from the future. I'll do everything I can to come up with a foolproof plan. I'm not trying to be a hero, I just want to save people because I've been through it myself. I want to save the people on that plane and prevent the families from falling apart. Besides, if Emily's fate this time isn't because of Alice but due to the butterfly effect caused by the plane crash, wouldn't stopping the plane from taking off cut off the disaster at its source?
She listened to my words but didn't respond. I didn't know if I could still go back in time through the subway without her help. So I could only look at her pleadingly.
Me, Tone, pleading, let me try, okay?
She sighed and nodded silently. I entered the subway car again, and the vehicle slowly started. As my consciousness began to fade, I asked the question that had been on my mind.
Me, Tone, serious, why are you helping me?
I heard her voice, distant and unreal as if coming from the horizon.
Girl tone, serious, I'm not helping you. I'm helping myself.
The plan to stop the plane from taking off succeeded 3 times. I successfully saved the passengers on the plane 3 times, preventing several family tragedies, but I couldn't save Emily. I kept going back to the past, trying to change every possible event that could lead Emily to her demise, but all my efforts ended in failure. No matter which point in time I returned to or what changes I made, Emily could not survive past December 5th. She would always pass away in various ways before dawn on December 6th. And when I woke up again, I would find myself in the familiar subway station. Just like now, I was lying on the bench, crushed by the accumulating pain, unable to get up. I stared at the blinding white light above, letting my tears flow freely. I heard a girl sigh. She squatted beside me.
Watching your loved ones go repeatedly before your eyes, I understand that kind of pain.
Through my tear-filled eyes, I noticed a hint of gentleness on the girl's usually indifferent face.
You can definitely save her.
With a hoarse voice, I asked,
How can I save her? What else can I do?
The sorrow in my heart made my speech fragmented. I raised my hand to cover my eyes.
I really can't save her anymore. Don't save me either. Just let me go with her. Let me be with Emily and our child.
Don't you always want to know who I am?
In the darkness, the girl's voice became exceptionally clear.
I am the proof that you can definitely save her.
She moved closer to me, and I felt her voice pierce through my ears, striking deep into my heart.
My name is Sophia, Emily.
These 3 words echoed and reverberated in my heart. This name was one that Emily and I had chosen for our unborn child. I released my hand from my eyes.
You are?
She nodded, first pressing her lips together lightly, then smiling broadly.
I am.
I suddenly sat up, staring intently at her face. She had the same delicate eyebrows as Emily, although her eyes were different. Yet, both had a small light brown mole on the fold of their left eyelid. I was so excited that I became incoherent, my despair diluted by joy. My eyes followed her, constantly observing her.
Our child had survived. I finally had a family.
Amidst my joy, I remembered what Sophia had said about the fall. Who is the person you couldn't save?
She shook her head.
You will know in the future.
She sat on the bench beside me, and I awkwardly asked,
In the future, will our family be happy? What kind of father am I?
I wanted to ask if I was a good father. But the words good father lingered on my lips, unable to come out. She turned to look at me, her expression becoming somewhat strange.
You are a murderer. You fled on a plane to escape punishment, but you disappeared.
Her words left me stunned. It took a few moments for me to comprehend the meaning behind her short sentence.
You must be joking. How could I possibly harm someone?
Yes, how could you possibly harm someone?
Though she laughed, her eyes sparkled as if liquid was rolling within them.
How could you possibly?
Seeing her laugh, I knew she was probably joking. The panic from earlier dissipated, and I laughed along with her. She suddenly stood up and walked to the open door of the subway.
Don't waste time. Go quickly, return to the day Michael fought, and stop him.
Okay.
I put away my doubts. After all, saving Emily was the top priority. And knowing that our daughter had survived and grown up, I no longer felt despair but was filled with confidence. This time, I would definitely succeed. I walked into the subway car, and the vehicle started moving forward. Sophia remained quietly in place. I stood at the entrance of the alley, my head hanging low, kicking a stone back and forth between my feet. The stone rolled tirelessly between my feet for dozens of rounds, but I still didn't see any sign of Michael. November 29, 3:07 p.m., Michael and a high school teacher were taken to the hospital from the south side of the city, near the WoHo Alley. This is all the scant information I have about the fight. I don't know why they fought, when it started, or what the high school teacher looks like. But it doesn't matter because I'm not here to solve a case, I'm here to prevent it. I pulled out my phone to check the time, 2:35 p.m. I had been waiting here for a full hour, but there was still no sign of Michael. Maybe Michael wasn't entering the alley but leaving it? I pocketed my phone and turned to look into the deep alley behind me. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I noticed a red dot suspended in the air, a cigarette but almost burned out, held between someone's fingers. The person leaned against the wall, looking particularly slender and frail in the shadows, yet the gold-rimmed glasses gave him a refined and gentle appearance.
Want one?
He offered me a cigarette, but I waved my hand to decline. He lit another one for himself. Not long after, I heard approaching footsteps. I looked up, but it wasn't Michael. Instead, it was a tall, slender girl in a bright red down jacket. Seeing her youthful and still plump face, I guessed she was probably a middle school student. A middle school student? I remembered Michael once said he fought the high school teacher to protect a girl. This girl in front of me was likely the one he mentioned. If what he said was true, why would this girl, who was once saved by Michael, choose to hide the truth when her benefactor was in trouble? I was frowning in thought when Michael, holding a basketball, walked past me without a glance and headed into the alley. Snapping back to reality, I caught up and knocked on the back of his head.
Aren't you supposed to be in class senior year?
Brother-in-law, what are you doing here?
If I weren't here, I wouldn't know you were skipping class. Isn't the school in the opposite direction?
I glanced at the basketball in his hands, and he sheepishly hid it behind his back.
Balancing work and rest. Balancing work and rest. Has my sister come?
When I shook my head, he visibly relaxed and started pleading shamelessly.
Just let me play basketball. Can't waste such good weather.
Go to class, or I'll call your sister right now. Your choice.
He cursed me for being heartless and reluctantly turned back towards the school. Watching his retreating figure, I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that I had cut off the reason for Emily to rush to B-City. Emily was safe, and so was our child. But what could have driven Michael to fight a high school teacher so fiercely? I turned to look at the still shadowy and silent alley. The person who had been smoking by the wall was gone. The girl was also nowhere to be seen. Did she leave that quickly? I checked the time, 2:42 p.m. With doubts in my mind, I walked into the alley, moving from sunlight into the cool shade. I shivered instinctively and caught a faint lingering smell of smoke. I walked through the smoky scent for a short distance when I heard a soft thud, like something hitting the wall, coming from within the alley. Not from the wall, but from a hidden path in the seemingly straight alley. A short and narrow path, empty except for a few puddles of dirty water mixed with trash, leading straight to the end. Was the sound coming from here? I walked a bit further in, and then I caught a whiff of floating smoke in the air.
Is anyone there?
I wanted to go further, but suddenly a hand landed heavily on my shoulder, catching me off guard. My hair stood on end. I swallowed hard, my mind uncontrollably flashing scenes from various suspenseful murder mysteries.
Brother-in-law, what are you doing?
Michael felt increasingly uneasy as he approached the school, but finally decided to return, determined to play basketball even if it meant getting scolded. I was also worried that Michael might encounter unexpected trouble if he lingered in the alley, so I quickly pulled him away under the pretense of playing basketball with him.
Let's go play some basketball.
Although the girls had long left, the high school teacher was nowhere to be seen, and the crisis in the alley seemed to have passed safely. I remained on high alert, constantly vigilant. Only after safely getting through December 5th could I finally relax. I spent the entire afternoon playing basketball with Michael. After safely seeing him home at dusk, I caught the nearest high-speed train and arrived home late at night. The living room light was still on, but Emily was already asleep. I quietly washed up and carefully got into bed, trying not to wake her, but she woke up anyway.
I can't sleep well when you're not here.
I softly apologized, and she snuggled into my arms, her voice carrying a hint of a whine. But I couldn't sleep at all, staring into the darkness and thinking, 6 more days. Those 6 days felt like an eternity. But on December 5th, I truly understood what it meant to be in unbearable pain. My boss, as usual, refused to grant me leave. So, I took the entire day off without permission on December 5th. After dropping Emily off at school in the morning, I found a spot in a tea shop across from the school where I could see the main entrance. Every time someone rushed out of the school gate, my heart would clench in fear. After realizing nothing had happened, I would go from fear back to anxiety. This cycle continued all day, leaving me utterly exhausted. In the evening, after Emily and I returned home, she went to the study to grade papers. I sat on the couch reading, waiting for her, but ended up dozing off. In the middle of the night, I woke up from a dream to find Emily and I covered with a blanket, squeezed together on the narrow couch. I gently pulled my arm out from under her and found my phone in the corner of the couch, December 6, 2022, 5 a.m.
What time is it?
I quickly turned off the phone and lay back down, pulling her into my arms again. It's 5 o'clock. We can sleep for another hour. She curled up in my arms like a newborn, her scent warm and comforting. I waited with a sense of relief until the alarm went off. I quickly turned off the alarm, got up to wash, and prepared breakfast. Then I gently woke Emily.
A woman's body was found by the river in City B.
For a moment, my heart stopped. I froze, then rushed to the bathroom, only to find her standing there, holding her toothbrush.
Look at this.
Relieved that Emily was fine, I took the phone from her. It was a video with a voiceover. The body lay in a pile of weeds, hair tangled around the neck like water plants, the face blurred slightly. The bright red down jacket stood out starkly. The jacket looked familiar. I remembered the girl in the red down jacket who had walked past me yesterday. Was it her? Emily's movement of taking the phone back snapped me back to reality. We went to the living room to eat, chatting about other topics. On December 6th, after dropping Emily off at work, I sat in the car, pondering the fire incident. When I called Margaret, she confirmed that Alice had indeed boarded that flight. This time, neither William nor Margaret came to the community gate to meet us. As Robert and Linda hurriedly changed their shoes, they asked a few concerned questions at the open door, noticing the stove in the kitchen was still on. A tiny deviation prevented a disaster. This reminded me of the feng shui Sophia once mentioned. Perhaps Emily had indeed been in a dangerous position before. Lost in thought, I drove to the company, facing reprimand and a salary deduction warning from my boss. Emily and I spent over 3 incredibly happy and peaceful months together. During these 3 months, Emily's belly grew larger, and I repeatedly urged her to take maternity leave, but she was unwilling.
Emily, you really should consider taking maternity leave now.
I can't leave the students before the exam. I don't want to miss any more time with them.
I couldn't argue with her and knew how much the students meant to her.
All right, but please wear these comfortable shoes and clothes. I've set my phone as your emergency contact, so call me immediately if you feel any discomfort.
I was reassured to let her continue teaching close to her due date because I knew Emily's careful and cautious nature. She would never let herself or the baby get hurt. But this time, I was wrong. On the first Monday of April, I received a call from Emily. When I answered, it wasn't Emily's voice but a mechanical female voice.
I am in an emergency situation. Please help me immediately.
It was the emergency contact message I had set for Emily. I felt a buzzing in my head, stood up, and ran out, calling Emily back as I ran.
This time, the call was quickly answered.
Emily slipped and fell on the podium. She's in the hospital for a checkup.
Where is she? Which hospital?
I rushed over and pushed open the hospital room door. I saw Emily immediately. She was wearing a bright red sweatshirt, leaning against the stacked pillows, her face pale but still maintaining a polite smile, talking to someone beside her.
Emily.
She turned her head, her eyes instantly reddening, and she reached out to hug my waist, crying softly. I knew Emily was afraid I would be angry at that moment. Although I knew she was acting, I couldn't help but feel heartbroken and gently comforted her for a while. Fortunately, there was no serious harm.
This is Thomas, a colleague from another school here for an exchange program.
The man was slender and gentle, wearing gold-rimmed glasses that made him look particularly scholarly and amiable.
Hello. I've only been here for a couple of days, mainly following Emily's exemplary class.
I scrutinized him, feeling like I had seen him somewhere before.
You look familiar, friend. Have we met before?
Even long after he left, I couldn't recall where I had seen him.
That fall really hurt.
Then take maternity leave.
I thought she would refuse, but to my surprise, she agreed after a few seconds of silence.
Afraid she might change her mind, I went straight to the school to handle the paperwork after leaving the hospital.
On the way home, we chatted and laughed about various things, enjoying the peace and happiness of being alone together. But at that time, I didn't know that this peace was the last mercy before the storm. As I walked from the parking lot to the elevator, a faint whiff of smoke lingered in the air. The elevator descended from the first floor to the basement, and as soon as the doors opened, a strong smell of smoke hit me.
What's with all this smoke?
I waved my hand to clear the smoke and gestured for the person inside to exit first so we could wait for the next elevator. Suddenly, a low, raspy male voice called out from inside.
Ms. Emily?
Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Thomas, staying at a friend's place, happened to live on the floor above us. What a coincidence, one that made me feel uneasy. Emily seemed more bothered by his comment as he left.
Miss Emily, you look beautiful in red.
The remark bothered me, but my unease went deeper. It was his behavior that was unsettling. Despite living on the upper floor, he always smoked in the stairwell on our floor. He always appeared when Emily went to throw out the trash or pick up a package, never missing a chance to ride the elevator with her and engage in pointless chatter.
He once showed me a news article about an unidentified woman's body found in a reservoir. The photo was horrifying, but he looked at it as if it were art.
Despite his odd behavior, he had helped us before, making his actions seem harmless. Recently, however, cigarette butts started appearing frequently outside our door. I suspected they were left by Thomas and compared the brand to his cigarettes. They matched. Without concrete evidence, I installed a camera outside our door to gather proof. Before I could capture any footage, despair hit me hard. Emily sent me a string of garbled text on WeChat, followed by a brief call that cut off. I stepped out of my office to call her back, but before I could dial, I received an emergency voice message from Emily.
I rushed back home, fearing she might have hurt herself. As soon as I opened the door, I smelled a faint trace of smoke.
I called out Emily's name, but there was no response. Her slippers were missing from the shoe cabinet in the living room, and she never wore her indoor shoes outside. She had to be home. I continued searching each room while dialing her number. I heard a faint vibration from a distance.
The vibration abruptly stopped, and my call was cut off. Emily would never play such a prank on me. The smell of smoke told me who it was. Thomas. I finally remembered where I had seen him before. He was the high school teacher who had done something despicable and was beaten up by Michael. And now, he might be threatening Emily, hiding somewhere in our home.
I tried to control my trembling, pulled a knife from the kitchen, and started dialing again. The vibration resumed, and this time the call wasn't cut off. I followed the sound to the bedroom and gently pressed my ear against the vibrating closet door. Suddenly, the door burst open from the inside.
A man dressed in black lunged at me with a fist. Caught off guard, I took the punch, dropping the knife. He lunged for the door latch.
I first looked at Emily, weakly sitting in the closet corner, her legs covered in blood. I rushed to help her, but she suddenly widened her eyes.
Behind you.
I turned to see Thomas swinging the knife towards my neck. Instinctively, I raised my arm to block, and a searing pain spread from my arm. Ignoring the pain, I aimed a kick at Thomas's lower body. He doubled over like a shrimp. I bent down, reaching for the knife, but he clung to it tightly.
He rammed his head into my stomach, knocking me against the bed's edge. Using my lower body to brace, I gripped his wrist holding the knife, struggling with him. He kneed my abdomen repeatedly, and the wound on my arm slowed me down. The knee strikes left me breathless. Then, he squeezed my arm wound, making me groan, and my grip weakened. He pulled his hand free, raising the knife to stab me. A colorful scarf dropped from above, tightening around his neck. Emily, pale as a sheet, had also fallen, trying to tighten the scarf with her teeth. But she was too weak. He broke free, flipping over to pin her down.
I saw the scarf's ends dangling by Thomas's neck. I lunged forward, grabbing the scarf ends and pulling him off Emily. He flailed his limbs, struggling desperately. Gradually, his struggles weakened and stopped. Even after he stopped moving, I didn't dare let go. I clung to the scarf like a lifeline. After a long while, in the now silent, blood-scented room, I remembered Emily. I released the scarf, my body weak, and crawled towards her. Emily's eyes were wide open, her hand on her stomach as if protecting the baby inside, but she was no longer breathing. Blood still flowed from the artery in her neck, merging into her red sweatshirt and disappearing instantly. After burying Emily, I waited for Sophia every day. I lived in a daze, like a walking shadow, consumed by endless pain. The only thing that kept me going was the thought that Sophia was still alive. As long as she was alive, there was still hope. But this time, she didn't come to find me.
She never appeared again, which made me panic.
Maybe, when I was on the brink of death, she would show up. I tried to end my life. But standing on the edge of a tall building, about to jump, I suddenly realized that Sophia surviving and growing up was already a future outcome. The outcome wouldn't change so easily. So, I must still have a chance to save Emily. I took out all my savings and spent months traveling to various corners of many cities. During this time, I learned about the heinous acts committed by Thomas. Besides the middle school girl in the red dress and the girl in the red dress found in the reservoir, there were 5 victims, including Emily. They varied in age and appearance, but the only common factor was that they all wore red and were all harmed by Thomas. He assaulted them before ending their lives and disposing of their bodies. I couldn't prevent Emily and other innocent girls from being harmed, but if given the chance, I could stop these evil thoughts at their source. It was simple: eliminate the evil itself. Just as I had this thought, I finally saw Sophia again.
I've been waiting for you.
She stood quietly by the car door, looking at me, as the story begins with Sophia, a woman haunted by her past.
When I was 7, my mother chose to leave us. She leaped off the balcony right in front of me.
A pair of hands covered her eyes just as her mother jumped, but the memory lingered.
I only saw her standing outside the balcony railing, her skirt fluttering in the wind.
This fleeting memory became more vivid as she grew up, etching itself into her life. Sophia threw herself into her studies and research, hoping to go back in time and save her mother.
I thought if I could just go back, I could save her.
But when she finally returned to that moment and grabbed her mother's hand, she realized it wasn't that simple.
I wanted to know why you, after ending the life of an unrelated high school teacher, chose to flee to City B 6 days later, where you had previously committed a crime.
Sophia thought everything might be connected to this mysterious figure.
If I could unravel the mystery surrounding you, then everything would fall into place.
As she investigated, she discovered that all clues pointed back to 7 years ago.
I went back to 7 years ago, only to find that you hadn't committed any crime then.
And on December 5, 2022, it wasn't the mysterious figure who boarded the plane, but her mother.
The plane to City B didn't disappear, it crashed after a brief loss of contact.
Everything became chaotic. Sophia couldn't make sense of it.
Why was the past different from the future? Isn't the future built upon the past?
Despite her confusion, she tried to prevent her mother from boarding the plane.
But just as I couldn't save her from jumping off the balcony, I couldn't save her from the plane crash.
Because on both days, there was still a version of Sophia, a 7-year-old and an unborn child.
If I saved my mother, it would alter the course of my fate. I wouldn't have the drive to research the time machine.
Without the time machine, she wouldn't be able to go back to save her mother, leading to the grandfather paradox.
So I thought of you, who existed in the same timeline as my mother.
But she found that no matter how the mysterious figure changed the past, they couldn't save her mother.
You replaced my mother and boarded the plane that led to her death, not to escape punishment, but as the only way to save her.
The only way to save her mother was for the mysterious figure to take her place, but the prerequisite was the existence of the time machine.
After witnessing my mother fall, I researched the time machine. After repeatedly watching her die, I retraced the clues back to 2022.
Upon returning to 2022 and discovering the differences, Sophia involved the mysterious figure to save her mother from the plane crash.
It was I who made you keep going back to prevent my mother's death.
But Sophia realized she could end everything on December 5, 2022.
If I break any link in this chain, everything will start to fade, and it will all end on the day it was supposed to.
She originally planned to wait until the mysterious figure gave up, but their persistence made her reconsider.
Your persistence made me realize that I couldn't selfishly make decisions. This isn't just about me.
So she told the mysterious figure everything.
You should understand that even if you save my mother, she will choose to leave us 7 years later. It's all meaningless.
But ultimately, the choice was theirs.
To end or to continue. The choice is yours.
I pondered over what Sophia had said. Upon discovering the foolproof way to save Emily, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Finally, I could save her. I would no longer have to watch her perish before my eyes, over and over again. I noticed a glimmer of light in her weary eyes, and a faint smile appeared on her face. When she realized I was looking at her, she reverted to her indifferent expression.
Just a fool.
My worries eased. She wasn't alone in this world. I smiled and spoke.
You say everything is meaningless, but the meaning of Emily and me is that you survived, and your meaning is that you met a fool. If everything ended on December 5th, 2022, with Emily passing away in fear, and me soon after due to despair, you wouldn't even know what this world looks like. Do you think that outcome has any meaning?
I paused, then continued.
Since I can remember, I've been in an orphanage, and the phrase I heard most growing up was, if you want to eat, you have to work. So I always understood one thing: everything comes at a price. If you want something, you have to give something in return. And I think, when I boarded that plane, and Emily fell from the balcony, you would probably break free from the cycle, and your life would start to flow. So, I chose to continue. Because only this way, you could survive, and we could meet.
Sophia hung her head in silence for a long time. I gently wrapped my arm around her shoulder. She looked up, and I saw the glistening light in her eyes.
But aren't you regretful? You loved each other so much, yet because of me, to keep me alive, you were forced to separate and lose your lives.
If everything ended on December 5th, I would soon follow, leaving with you all. That could be seen as a kind of reunion. But as I said, departing to protect the ones you love, or departing in despair and pain, I would definitely choose the former. And Emily, she would feel the same, but when I reach the future, I will still ask her. I'm not regretful about leaving first, I just regret not taking you to a fair, or even having a meal together as a family.
We did have a meal together. Sort of, together. That bowl of dumplings, after they were cooked, I tasted one.
That bowl of dumplings? Did Sophia cook the dumplings?
You took the dumplings out of the cold water?
Yes, I couldn't stand it anymore. Mom really couldn't cook. How could she always turn them into dumpling soup and still smile so proudly?
She took a deep breath and wiped away her tears. We wiped our tears and laughed.
If we meet again, I'll definitely make cola chicken wings for you.
She looked up at me, word by word, Dad.
I took the necklace and placed it on my chest, nodding in a world blurred by tears.
If we meet again, I will definitely.
Epilogue, I went to the future and told Emily everything. I thought she wouldn't believe me, but after hearing my story, she cried and hugged me.
Sorry for making Sophia and you bear so much for me.
We cried and embraced, expressed our love, and finally said goodbye. I stood in the shadow of the doorway, watching her walk towards Sophia's room. I couldn't hear their voices, but I knew it was another farewell. A farewell that 7-year-old Sophia couldn't yet understand. While waiting, I recalled the words I used to persuade Emily earlier. I didn't want her to jump off the balcony, so I persuaded her to consider another way. Maybe directly telling Sophia everything and helping her develop a time machine could also succeed. But she said, making changes rashly would make the future unknown and uncontrollable. There was only one chance, we couldn't take risks. I wanted to say more, but she asked me, if I had known from the beginning that boarding the plane could save her without fail, would I still risk trying other methods? Thinking about it, I sighed again.
At that moment, Emily hurriedly came out of the bedroom. She wiped her tears and walked straight to the balcony, climbing over without hesitation. I didn't want to face Emily's departure again and wanted to turn away. But the bedroom door was suddenly pushed open, and Sophia joyfully called out,
Mom!
She froze upon seeing Emily standing outside the railing. I had always known that Sophia would witness Emily's departure, but seeing it with my own eyes, I still felt an indescribable suffocation and pain. Emily, like me, froze while holding the railing.
At that moment, I saw a girl walk out from the study. She looked at Emily with tears streaming down her face and slowly walked to Sophia's side. Standing under the light of the living room chandelier, she raised her hand to cover Sophia's eyes. Emily recognized her and smiled with relief. She let go of the railing, letting her body fall back into the wind. And I, in a world blurred by tears, with a smile like Emily's, turned and walked into the darkness. But behind me, the light was bright and radiant.